This is Paul Schneiderman on the 10th edition of Sports and Stuff. And today we have a very special guest. We have former U.S. Senator Slade Gorton. Senator Gorton does not need a long introduction, but I want to give a little background to you, to listeners, Senator. So give me a minute. Slade Gorton served in the Washington State Legislature. He also was a 3-term Washington State Attorney General. Senator Gorton, of course, served for 3 terms as a U.S. Senator representing our state of Washington. Since Slade Gorton left the Senate, he's been involved in many interesting things, including serving as a 9/11 Commission member. He has served on various boards and commissions since he left the Senate. There's currently the Slade Gorton International Policy Center based in Seattle. Senator Gorton's also a father, grandfather, and was married to Sally Gorton until her passing in 2013. There's a very readable and interesting 2011 book about Slade Gorton's life, which I want to recommend to listeners. Slade Gorton, A Half Century in Politics by John Hughes. It's online. Today we're going to learn a little more about your career, Senator. We're going to learn about your thoughts on some contemporary issues, and we're going to have a little special focus today on some of the work that you've done on professional sports issues. So we only have 27 minutes today, but we should have fun and get some topics in. First of all, Senator, thank you for coming on Sports and Stuff.
Well, I'm happy to be on it. I could say as an introduction that Major League Baseball is not in the job description of either the Attorney General or United States Senator, but it marks one of the most important parts of my life.
Absolutely. Well, you've done a lot on for Seattle on baseball issues for sure. Well, Senator, can you share with us a little minute about how you got the bug to run for political office nearly 60 years ago in 1958?
Well, it goes back beyond that. My parents were both interested in politics, and I was growing up as a kid. And so it was a natural outgrowth of being a lawyer. And in 1958, the year I first ran, the state had been redistricted, both its congressional districts and its legislative districts been redistricted. And there was a district very close to where I lived then that had no representatives at all. So I'll take a chance. I moved into that district and filed and won the first 5 terms as a state representative.
That's great. That's great. You were a young man when you did that, too, for sure.
Yes, I was. I'm not now.
Well, you're doing well, still doing well. Senator, I want to ask you about a very famous American legal case. It was a very famous American libel case that took place in Okanagan County. One of your colleagues in the state legislature, John Goldmark, was accused of being a communist, and he was represented by a very famous late attorney, who I know you knew well, Bill Dwyer, who later became a federal judge. And in that case, Senator, you were a young politician, and you potentially risked your political career when you agreed to testify on John Goldmark's behalf in that case. It took a lot of courage, but you did it because you thought it was the right thing to do. Looking back, Senator, has that case always been on your mind when you've evaluated other tough decisions to make in your life?
It turned out not so much a dangerous choice as it was very, very good. John Goldmark and I served in the legislature together. We were rivals. We were opposite parties. He was one of the best speakers for the Democrats there, and I always prided myself when I could keep even with him in a debate. And so when Bill Dwyer, I regarded the best lawyer in Seattle, called and asked me to testify as a representation witness for John Goldmark, I instantly knew I had 2 choices. I could say no, look on myself as a coward for the rest of my life, or I could say yes, get myself in political trouble. It didn't turn out to be a particularly difficult decision. I said yes. John Goldmark won that trial because Bill was a fine lawyer. John Goldmark, a fine person himself. But I did have much more serious options the next time I ran for re-election with a candidate who effectively called me a communist. But I won my race. John Goldmark had not won it substantially, and actually it added to my reputation rather than hurting me.
Interesting. But at that time, you were definitely taking a political risk, though, weren't you, Senator, testifying for Mr. Goldmark?
I thought I was, and I was, and that I would have easy race not done so. It was a harder race, but it was a good race.
Interesting. Senator, you served 3 terms, as we know, in the U.S. Senate. Can you mention 1 or 2 votes that really stood out as tough votes that you cast?
In the United States Senate?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the first ones in my very, very first term had to do with whether or not Boeing sell AWACS, that is, spy aircraft, to Saudi Arabia. Boeing was a major constituent. The Jewish community was at Israel were very much opposed to the sale. And my other senator from the state was Scoop Jackson, who often was known as the senator for Boeing. Senator Jackson voted with the Israelis. I voted with Boeing as being my biggest constituent, and that was a tough one. I was a great admirer and a friend of Senator Jackson while we were in the Senate together. It was difficult to part from him, but it came to me that it was an appropriate sale, and I did so.
Interesting. I sort of, as a young kid, remember that episode. Any other tough Senate votes that you can share with us?
Well, there were a lot of Senate votes. Every year of the votes on the budget itself. One year, the budget that finally passed the Senate was one that I actually sponsored. That was a difficult challenge because 2 or 3 budgets had been defeated before it was put up. And it was a challenge, and both because it was very, very large and because it was very, very complicated. And there were quite a number of votes like that, issues like that, civil rights issues, land-related issues in the time I was in the Senate. But now, it's getting to be a pretty long time ago, and they're beginning to blur.
Well, yeah, you definitely had a lot of votes. It's hard to keep track of all of them, I bet. Senator, who are a couple of the favorite senators that you served with? Who are a couple that really stood out for their legislative skills?
Well, one was our own Scoop Jackson. No question about that. It was an honor and a pleasure to serve with him from the same state, even across the political aisle. The Senator Ford and Mark Hatfield were sort of my models what a senator ought to look like and ought to act. Senator Peter Menes from New Mexico was my candidate for MVP in the Senate. He knew more and worked harder on more varied issues than anyone else that I knew. Warren Rudman from New Hampshire had been Attorney General while I was Attorney General of Washington, and we had been friends even then. He was one of my very, very closest friends in the Senate. And Rudy Boston from Minnesota may have ranked number 1 in the Senate as far as personal friendship is concerned during my first term. During my second and third terms, when Rudy Boswitz was gone, it was certainly Trent Lott who ended up being the Republican leader.
Interesting. This is Paul Schneiderman, host of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Slade Gorton. Senator, I want to ask you before we go to sports on a couple of contemporary issues. Any thoughts right now on the Trump administration?
I'm sorry, what's the question? Any
thoughts you have right now on the Trump administration?
Well, I'm not sure they should go on a family program.
Okay. So, do you feel that he's a different kind of Republican, the president?
I feel that he's wasting the greatest opportunity that conservative voices had to be real successes by his antics and his lack of knowledge about issues and his disrespect for almost everyone he comes in contact with. Not just those with whom he disagrees, but even with those with whom he agrees. Yeah.
I don't think he's a Slade Gorton or a Bush Republican, huh?
Well, I think those are perhaps 2 slightly different things, but he's not either.
Okay. Senator, I know you serve in the Senate for quite a few terms with Joe Biden. Do you see Biden as being viable at all in 2020 as a presidential candidate?
I see Joe Biden as one of the nicest people I know and a guy you would love to have lunch with who is always wrong.
Interesting. Well, you served for about 18 years with him, so you obviously know him.
We did, and we got along very well. But no, I don't think he will be a serious candidate for president.
Interesting feedback. 9/11 Commission, Senator, you served on it. How do you think the government's done in implementing some of the Commission's recommendations?
the 9/11 Commission was one of the pivotal points of my life. It ironically was a reward for having lost presidency a year or two before the 9/11 Commission convened. It's probably been the single most outside commission of that nature in the history of our republic, and it's that because so many of its recommendations have actually come to pass. Most particularly, the creation of one single director of national intelligence who has the ability to get all the work that all the other 16 or 17 intelligence agencies do in our government and see to it that the information is properly distributed. In my view, that is the principal reason that we have not had another 9/11 type attack during the interval. We have been subjected, of course, to several horrific terrorist attacks, and we almost certainly will be again. But we're much better prepared for them now. We've fought many of them before they come to fruition. And a lot of that is the work of the 9/11 Commission. In addition, of course, it provided the first truly objective history of exactly what happened, what led up to 9/11. We didn't cast blame or make praise in either one. We simply let out facts and allowed the American people to conclude that so-and-so had screwed up, someone else had done a good job.
Well, really interesting feedback coming from you as a member of that commission. Okay, Senator, there are basically 3 different chapters of Seattle baseball history that you were involved in. And when you were the Attorney General of Washington State, you led a lawsuit against the American League that resulted in baseball agreeing to award Seattle the Mariners. Can you give us a little background on that case?
Sure. Only real baseball fanatics remember that Seattle had a team called the Pilots in the major leagues for 1 year in 1969. That was the first year I was Attorney General. In 1970, almost overnight, spirited out of Seattle and sent to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I decided that was pretty outrageous and used the ability of a Attorney General to bring a lawsuit charging the American League with fraud and breach of contract. And ironically, you've already mentioned this name. The lawyer I hired to it was Bill Dwyer.
Sure.
The lawyer who got me to testify for John Goldmark. And it took us 5 years to actually get the American League in front of a jury in Everett, and at which point Bill Dwyer made the entire case to the city of Seattle by examining adverse witnesses, the arrogant owners of several of the then American League baseball teams. And I put it this way, by the time he was done, the jury was probably going to vote capital punishment. The American League recognized that and very, very quickly settled by giving us to Seattle, giving it to us exactly the same price, just over $5 million the Pilots had originally cost. And incidentally, that lawsuit was also responsible for the creation of the Toronto Blue Jays, because, of course, the league had to go up by 2.
Great history. Did you participate in the trial, Senator? Did you do any cross and direct examination during the trial?
No, I did not participate in the trial. I hired Bill and supervised, got reports from him, and occasionally gave suggestions as to what they ought to do. But I hired a man I considered to be the best trial lawyer in the city, and I let him do his job, and he's today.
Well, it was a great legal effort. This is Paul Schneiderman on Sports and Stuff with Senator Slade Gorton on Rainier Avenue Radio. Senator, there was another chapter of Seattle baseball history, and you were in the U.S. Senate in the early 90s. You played a role in securing a new ownership group. Then there was a Japanese company involved. Give us a little background on how you helped put together that deal.
Well, it's hard for us to remember now that back then, the 70s and 80s, even the early 90s, there was no super billionaire, extremely rich person in Seattle who was just simply going to be willing to buy a major league team as a toy. And so The Seattle Mariners were always afraid of leaving. The Kingdome turned out not to be a good place to see baseball in at all. The team almost never had a 500 year. It went through 3 ownerships, each of which was an absentee ownership. And the last post from Jeff Williams from Indianapolis got a sweetheart deal on the lease, good revisions on the lease from King County, by agreeing that before he moved the team or sold the team, he would offer for sale 90 days to someone who would keep it in Seattle at a price that would be set by an appraiser. Now, because we'd never found such a buyer before, he thought he was going to be able to move the team. And because I had started the Mariners in the first place, I was called on, please help find a new owner. I had always thought that the Japanese, as great baseball fans, would be a good source for such an ownership. And so I went to the Nintendo of America, a branch of Nintendo of Japan, and I got an opportunity to talk to the number 1 and number 2 people in December of the year that this was going on. When my appointment secretary called them, they asked what the subject was, and they were told baseball. And they said very politely, we don't have any interest in baseball, but the senator wants to come and talk to us. Of course he can. Well, for people who didn't have any interest in the subject, they kept me there for 2.5 hours asking me questions. And then I went off on a trip and got back shortly before Christmas. And on December 23rd, the eve of Christmas Eve, Minoru Arakawa, the CEO of Nintendo of America and the son-in-law of the owner of Nintendo in Japan, called me and said, Mr. Senator, my father-in-law says that Nintendo has done very well in the state of Washington. It's been a good place for us to do business. We owe the community something. So if you need $100 million to buy a baseball team, you've got $100 million. Now, I may tell you, that's certainly the nicest Christmas present I've ever received.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was great work that you did in helping to save baseball in Seattle. So there was another chapter a couple years later, about 96, the Mariners owners were threatening to not go through with the Safeco Field package, and you intervened again. Tell us about that for a minute.
First, of course, the Mariners tried an election to build a new stadium, and it failed by a tiny margin. But it failed in that great year, 1995, as I remember, when I got a picture of Jimmy Thorne with the winning run against the Yankees in the playoffs, and everyone in the state in office was just frightened to death that the Mariners would leave again then. And so the legislature met and created a bit of financing what is now Safeco Field that didn't require an election. But they created a public facilities commission basically to run it. And my view of it is the public facilities commission interfered so much in the Mariners getting the stadium built that they really wanted, that the governing bodies, the Mariners themselves, just said, we've had it with the community. We're not one of them. Just said, we're never going to deal with another politician in this community at all. We've had it. We're leaving. We can't make any money here. We get the stadium built that we want, and we're out of it. Well, the CEO of the Mariners then was literally the person I'd known in Seattle for the longest period of time, John Ellis. And he made an exception about saying he never talked to another politician and just talked to me. So in one very long day, we set up the conditions under which the Mariners would stay and would have more say about what Safeco looked like. And didn't present it as a bargaining position, but presented it to the King County Council and the Seattle City Council as, on a take it or leave it basis. This is fair. If you say yes, then go ahead. If you say no, we're gone. Well, they ended up saying yes, of course, because they did not want to lose Major League Baseball. And so the last hurdle in the way of creating one of the finest facilities for baseball in the United States of America was
great background. Paul Schneiderman on Sports and Stuff with Senator Slade Gorton. Senator, you were in the Senate. You were involved in trying to push through some legislation limiting the ability of pro teams to move. Why don't you think that legislation ever went through, Senator?
Well, I know perfectly well why it didn't happen. Now, this was before the Nintendo people bought the Mariners and kept them here. But after we had one or two ownership changes, yes, I sponsored bills in the Commerce Committee on which I served that would make it more difficult for Major League teams to move from one place to another. Unfortunately, the chairman of that committee, John Danforth of Missouri, who was a very close friend, really represented Budweiser.
Sure.
From St. Louis and the Budweiser family. And they were vehemently opposed to the legislation. So John Danforth did what a senator from Missouri should do. He buried the bill.
Okay.
In Congresses in which I introduced it. And it never had a chance simply because of the structure of the Senate.
Interesting background. Senator, I know you were involved, and I'll just disclose this, I was involved in the Save Our Sonics effort. You were involved in the Sonics issue. Looking back, Senator, 10 years later, are you surprised we don't have an NBA team yet?
No, I'm not. I'm disappointed. But the league, the National Basketball Association then said that the present arena was not adequate as a facility. And of course, that's what Scope said, that you could never make money on it. And before they left, I was a part of a group that included Steve Ballmer, who came up with $750 to $300 million, was the figure then as it is today, needed to turn the Key Arena into a good arena. Steve Ballmer literally offered the city of Seattle a gift, $150 million, half of the cost. Seattle had $75 million, another quarter itself. What it wanted to do was to extend the nuisance taxes that had been collected in order to build the garage, Safeco, and Safeco. Restaurant taxes, hotel taxes, special license fees, and the like, for the last $75 million. Now, they would have had a vote in the city of Seattle on the subject. But to have that vote, it required action by our legislature. And the state legislature refused to allow Seattle even to vote on the subject. And so I lay the fact that Oklahoma City has the Sonics now, not to show, not to evil people in Salt Lake City, but to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Frank Schaaf, who would never allow such an issue to come to a vote.
Member it well. Very disappointing. Senator, right now we're having a big debate in our community, Key Arena versus Soto. Where are you at in this whole arena debate right now?
Well, I am not a part of it. I'm not a part of any of the parties who are working on that. But it seems to me that Key Arena people have won the debate and we ought to go ahead with it.
Sure. It looks like it's heading that direction, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Do you, looking back, Senator, you put a lot of blame on the governor and the Speaker of the House in terms of the Sonics leaving, right?
Not the governor, the Speaker.
Speaker, gotcha. Not allowing that vote is a very good historical point. Well, tell us what's going on with the Slade Gorton Center in Seattle. Can you share with us a little bit about that, the Slade Gorton National?
As a matter of fact, I've just come home from interviewing two of our crop of students.
Great.
This year, we've had a group between 15 and 20 students who apply to be a part of it, mostly from UW, many from Seattle U, some from Seattle Pacific, and some from further out, who come with us for about 8 or 10 programs a year, where I get people I've served with or know and like from both parties to come and talk to them about leadership and how these very successful people have become as successful. And then we require the students to put on a program or two programs themselves. They write an essay at the end for a small scholarship prize. It's gotten better every year that we've had it.
That's just great.
And I 2 1-hour sessions, one in the fall and one in the spring, with each one of the students. I just finished the 6th and 7th set interviews for this year's class, first round this morning.
That's just great. That's great. That's great. Were you involved at all in the Seahawks relocation at all, Senator, back in the 90s? Did you have any role in that?
No, I was not. I was quite adequately taken care of in the open analysis. I can claim no participation in it whatsoever.
Okay. I did read, Senator, that you met with then Seahawks owner Ken Behring, and you apparently didn't believe him when he said he wasn't going to move the team.
Well, that's right. He was basically not a believable person.
Okay. Well, Senator, we're in the process of wrapping this up, and it's really been fun to get your thoughts on some sports issues and learn a little more about your career. I mean, I wish I could talk to you for hours. But we're able to get a little time in. And what does the future hold for Slade Gorton? What do you see happening in the future?
Well, I'm pretty senior now, still working part-time for a law firm and still running the Gorton Center and a couple of boards. I just intend to keep active as long as I can. Gotcha.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. You're a figure in Washington State, our country. It's been involved and had a role in many different things. And I really appreciate you coming on Sports and Stuff today, Senator.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. You're a good interviewer.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.